Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Oh Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Oh Nitai Gaura, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Gaura Hari Bol. Hari Bol. Jai Shri Gurudev Ki. Todos devotos ki. And, well, I would always like to try and start when I speak first with one of my favorite verses. Shakala Vaishnava Pade Mo Namaskar, Ite Kichuya Pura Nahu Kayamar, Hoya Chen Hoi Ben Prabhu Jato Bhakta Jan Vandana Koryami Shavara Charan. And it's an amazing verse because it says, I offer my obeisances to the saintly people that have existed in the past, and I offer myself to them, but I offer myself to the saintly people in the future who I have not met yet. And it's a very sweet verse. So kind of the general mood is you won't be the loser. Like it's a good posture. So it's just a nice way to kind of beginning an attempt on anything is to offer oneself to whatever the moment is asking. And I don't know if specifically we want to stay on the original subject. Oh no. You can make him join also. Yeah, please grab him. Yeah. So first rule of public speaking, connect with the audience. Like physically pull the noise. Exactly. I don't know. I would say, does anyone have any burning thoughts that they would like to discuss?
I don't want to steer you back to the subject, but I really love your ideas about speaking about to newcomers. But I'm open to whatever you have to say in your heart now. I don't think it's fair to say. I don't want to enforce you to
Yeah,
do
no,
it.
it is nice actually. It is a nice meditation. Um, and maybe that's all of our maybe that's all of our duty actually, right? Is to try and attempt to speak the deepest truth that we possibly can, right? And then who are we to speak the truth? Well, that's rough and brutal. So then we just have to make our best attempt at speaking the highest truth that we possibly can, right? And then the faith that if I will express the deepest truth that's possible, then the only thing that can come in return to me from that will be goodness, right? So then the quest is, what is the deepest truth that I can possibly share, right? And then we can say the people that are speaking the truth and sharing the truth, we can call them saints, right? So we're desperately trying to come into the proximity of people who have a graceful vision of reality, and then to hopefully imbibe some of their sweet heart that comes out in their mouth, and then live our lives in alignment with that. And in regards specifically to the subject that you are bringing up, you know, we're trying to be as authentic as we can, because somehow or other, like, truth and authenticity have some type of relationship with each other. And so it's, we're expressing the things that most capture us, capture our hearts, right? Because the scriptures are kind of endless and go on forever. So what's the thing that can actually like arrest my attention? And then can I share that thing that gives me hope, right? Because if you think about it, like, you know, you're putting the goal very high. You're saying, I want to know or have a relationship with the infinite cause of all causes, right? Like, you know, this universe, this planet, all of it is like, they're like little mustard seeds. So I'm saying that I somehow or other want to have a relationship with the infinite cause of all causes. So it's practically arrogant if it wouldn't be our own real nature to try and have a relationship with the infinite and the infinite's own merciful kindness that he also has some affection for us. But because it's such a lofty goal, right? It's like understandable that we get hopeless on the path. So then we're taking heart in something, and we have to keep on digging on that thing that's keeping us alive. So I always think, like, when we're trying to share something in a public way, we're trying to share the most beautiful truth that is keeping us going, right? And for different people, when the one of the purposes of a spiritual festival is you can find what's keeping different people going, right? So we get a little chance to see inside of their heart something mysteriously wonderful. And you're going, oh, they found some hope in that way. Oh, this person found some hope in that. Oh, they're carrying on, right? They're carrying on the impossible journey. You could say it's like the group of like ultimate idealists in a sense, right? It's like, you know, the impossible journey, and they're super fired up to do it. They're going to run up the hill chanting the whole time. Like, it's really sweet. So, speak something that's authentically giving you some sustenance, and then you know, to connect with what people are really wanting to know. Often so much is revealed in people's questions. So sometimes if people ask a question, sometimes I'm just praying, you know, what to be utilized, and hopefully some advice will come from me that will assist them on their journey, right? And that's also like a nice piece of advice, I think, for trying to speak in front of people. Then it takes the pressure off of you. Then you're just trying to be utilized. So that's also another aspect. It's not on you to figure out the exact thing to manipulate the audience. You're just connecting with someone genuinely, praying to be utilized. And sometimes it works out, and that's good. And sometimes it doesn't work out, and that's good, right? Because both of them are going to kind of impart something wonderful. So, I would say the questions of who the audience is are infinitely important in trying to connect with an audience, to try and be as authentic as possible, and genuine in what you're truly vitally interested in within Krishna consciousness or whatever you're speaking about, but ideally to connect with something, because that's kind of getting to the heart of the thing, actually. And there's that famous quote. It says, "We see the world as we are, not as they are." And so we sort of assume that someone is connecting with Krishna consciousness maybe because of something that we're connecting with. And the amazing thing is that's not actually always true. And so people's questions and people's realizations, they're kind of giving us a much, like a wonderful broad spectrum illumination into what's possible. So I don't know, I always think of speaking, even though there's one person doing a majority of the output, there is also kind of a unique feedback loop that's also happening at the same time. And it's like very, very amazing actually, because we can say like all of the books that we're ultimately calling as the center of what we're here for came from the sincere question of the student to the divine master. So we can say this is like our favorite thing to do. Like throughout time and space is have conversations about what the ultimate goal of life is and what's the best way to go there. Right. And what's interesting, Guru Maharaj even uses those words. He'll say, what is the least friction that you can have? And he'll even say, what is the least amount of energy that you can expend? Because you're thinking like, oh, I'm just going to like give more and do more and all this stuff, all these things more. But he's always like recommending like, hey, the scriptures are giving you this hopeful advice that will cause you to like proceed with like less road bumps, so to speak. And he's saying like, if you can adopt this internal space in your heart, he goes, you will find yourself in another type of consciousness than what you can even imagine. Because, for example, we're just imagining dedication from an exploitive place, right? We're just speaking all the time that there's like a way where there's a world of giving where it's actually more beautiful than receiving, right? And we're saying, and we're on the hopeful journey to offer ourselves to that beautiful reality. And then he's saying, actually, if you adopt this mood, if you can have some humility in your heart and you can offer yourself to that upper world, humility is so beautiful that like all of these other things can come, right? So it's like, whatever that service is, maybe it will be speaking, maybe it's doing something, maybe it's this kind of thing, maybe it's that thing. Those are almost like incidental. So you could say like you're always kind of trying to find the core of the thing and the core of the thing and the core of the thing. And then that core ultimately powers every other expression that's going to happen. So it's an amazing kind of premise where Guru Maharaj is saying, actually, if you can adopt this internal mood, all of those things can be gifted and you will be able to, if Nityananda Mahaprabhu want you to be able to connect with people and share this good news with them, right? Because there is an actual relief for the kind of hell that we're existing in all the time, right? That's good news, right? The saints of the universe, they're not just coming with like a temporary band-aid on the like situation called we're all heading towards death, right? They're actually coming with affectionate good news. And they're saying, yeah, you're tortured in the forest fire of your senses and it never ends and they never take a vacation. If you pleasure all of your senses as much as you possibly can, they're never going to take a vacation. And they're saying, but there is good, sweet news, and you can be utilized by that good news. And your life could actually be a lot larger than this tiny, small, like cave-like world where you're inflicting your imposition on the environment. And if that's not good news, like I don't know what is. But this idea where Guru Maharaj is saying, actually, you could say like the core of everything is I want to be utilized, right? I'm here to serve you and it's not about me. And then if that happens, then all of the other qualities that may or may not be helpful that you can calculate in the world of trying to communicate and be authentic and all these things can come. And everything to the inverse, we're not going to be so intelligent that we can figure out how to manipulate the infinite. So the only thing that's attractive to that upper world is going to have to be within the world of surrender. And and actually there's a really nice sentence. I was speaking with Parmananda recently and he was saying, we have not forgotten about our guardians and our guardians have not forgotten about us. And this is also a very sweet meditation, because we're seen by some other plane. We can't see them. We can't see what is happening there. But they're saying some type of mood in the heart is so profound that it can actually pull us to somewhere else. So, prerequisite, whatever we do, we want to try and offer ourselves to the world of Sharanagati. And then maybe we will be utilized to speak, and maybe we will be effective, and maybe we won't be. But there's a few things where we're just throwing ourselves in a certain direction. And if we find ourselves in the association of other people who are trying to throw themselves, then we can call that a good life. Here's one of my favorite sentences from Guru Maharaj in Sermons 2, I think. Maybe Sermons 1. But he says, on our journey to the infinite, we may find that it is a little longer than we originally conceived. And he goes, and it is at this point in the journey that we will see the value of the Vaishnava. And he goes, and then we will see, he goes, they are standing like pillars of faith. And they are affirming, yes, this is possible. And then he goes through like the different stories right after that. He says, and Prahlad is living like this, and he's all these different saints. And their very lives are such expressions of faith. He goes, just by reading the stories of their own lives, we can feel our own faith becoming enhanced, just to see that it's possible. And we can say that that's still happening today, right? There's devotees today, their lives are actually impossible. We don't know how they're able, we hope that their secret will like kind of wash over us. How are they able to live such a life of authentic sacrifice, and not just for like 6 months, but like decade after decade after decade of just unbelievably gorgeous, beautiful sacrifice. And then that affirms something else has to be sustaining us. Has to be. You can't do that kind of thing without no feeling inside, right? There's something sustaining you, and it's not going to be, the sort of like bewitchment of the external energy, right? There's an outward, external moving energy and an inward, upward moving current. And there's, depending on where we can perceive, you're kind of surfing in or out, right? Has to be, because externally their lives are so simple in a sense, right? And they don't even want anything. That's the complicated thing about really saintly people. You're trying to give them, it's like, no, I don't want you to serve me. And they're too humble, It's like, anytime I'll be watching actually some videos of Srila Gurudev, I feel like he's so humble, it's actually astonishing. Yeah, it's disarming. It's so peculiar. And then you can see, then you won't even be able to perceive necessarily. You can't even see humility. Like, you won't get past that barrier, and then you won't even be able to appreciate the kind of person that he was. That's how profound humility is. That's like another thing. And so devotees are very often very humble, very hidden. They don't want to take up space or energy of other people, and then you have to really kind of like work honestly to try and find where they're hiding, and then hope they'll be merciful with you like that. But maybe that's helpful. Are you satisfied over there? Did we do good? You have your time.
Can I ask you a question? What are you doing the microphone? Otherwise,
Yeah.
I'm gonna be punished.
Yep.
So, in 2008, Srila Goswami Maharaj came to Brazil, and we had a preaching event. He was in a movie theater. We have 200 people in the movie theater, and he was giving a lecture, super beautiful, and someone in the middle of the lecture raised their hand for a question. And then Maharaj, go ahead, you can speak. And the person, the gentleman came, open a little notebook and start reading from it. And he was like, India is evil, and he started making a statement, kind of antagonic statement. And then I'm going to tell you the situation, but the question in advance is like, did you encounter situations like that, or any story you can tell us about different situations? But to conclude the story, I was terrified because, oh my gosh, Goswami Maharaj is going to hate me. How did I bring him to this situation? I'm humiliating the mission. What I'm doing? And then Maharaj stand up and say, drop your notebook. And the guy, no. You drop your notebook right now. I will answer your question, but you drop the notebook. Stop reading. Tell me from your heart what you need.
Wow.
And the guy couldn't carry on. He mumbled, and he couldn't conclude his idea because it was not a matter of idea. It was a matter of being antagonic position or making a statement. And then Maharaj addressed some of it and brought the audience back in a very gentle way, but he was super firm. And then at the end, he was like, was super cool. Like, he was super thrilled. He found everything super, entertaining for him. And then, so this is a story that I really capture my mood to understand that what I would imagine a professional speaker dealing versus a devotional experience speaker dealing, and what he draw out of this conversation. So I want to hear a little bit of your experience. It doesn't have to be in the same film.
Oh, that's a great question. Maybe you have some thoughts that you want to share on this. If you're here, it's better. That's really interesting. So I don't specifically have a story where anyone's been antagonistic necessarily to me. But what I would say is, well, I have a couple favorite stories. One, there was a person that I met. He was a Ukrainian, and they were doing these classes of like a Vedic life for a while. And he went to the class and he said everything was totally crazy, and then he went home. And so I said, okay, well then what happened? And he said the next week they were doing the same thing on Vedic life. And then he said, I don't agree with anything these people are talking about. It's super strange. And then he went home. And he proceeded to go to a class like every night for about like 9 months or something, even before he spoke to someone. And then, of course, like I had met him at a devotee festival, so he had become like very charmed actually by spiritual life. So, I mean, I wouldn't say it's necessarily an antagonistic moment where, there's like a gotcha moment. Every once in a while, sometimes people try to ask you like a faithful question where it's like, ooh, tricked ya. Like, can like God create like a sandwich that's bigger than what he can eat or something, like something like that, and you're like, yep, he can, right? But what's really amazing to me overall, when people especially try to do like a gotcha sentence, I find that the like teachings from Srila Sridhar Maharaj immensely broad. And so like when you start to say to someone like, hey, we're just talking about a super small slice of time and culture right now, and this is what's in vogue right now, and maybe the inverse was in vogue 100 years ago or 15, like these things are passing. And we're looking at life through a tiny keyhole, and there's actually like a universe that's going on, and my perspective is really small. People start to almost feel like very curious is my response, where you're saying like, you're trying to deal with infinity. Like I absolutely adore that one sentence from the British poet Shelley. He goes, we all live in our skull-sized kingdoms. Right? And you start like speaking like that, and all of a sudden there seems to be like this change of like, wait, you're saying that like reality is not exactly the way it looks, and you want to journey through infinity, and your body is just a very faint, like a vehicle, and you're something far more profound that's here, not just for selfish, like sensory impulse. And it's less antagonistic, and all of a sudden it's very curious, and it's not really like seated in so much like ritual, which usually people are like when they're feeling really responsive to something something. It's maybe a ritual that they had from either the past or from the present. So that's overall my experiences. Like as soon as you start talking about like what Srila Guru Maharaj is talking about, people are like genuinely like shocked. Like, what are you talking about? What does that mean? And then the other time, the only story that I thought of was just that one devotee who just came. And we do have some like people who've been coming for a really long time to the temple in Salt Lake. They're super like well read, and they'll ask questions. And what's really interesting is those questions have a lot in them. They really do. And so there is almost like a meditation of like wandering through those questions that they have. And as long as the question's like overall sincere, there's always like the layer beneath what the person is exactly expressing. And if you can find that, it's like the base of a genuine kind of interaction. So overall, it's okay. As long as it's a genuine question, it can kind of be amazing, you know. And it means that people care, right? When there's a lot of emotion involved with something, that means like you actually care about this subject instead of everyone just like, so I don't know. That's just my experience overall. And maybe you have something else you want to share.
It's a very interesting question. And I think Goswami Maharaj's reaction to that is very interesting because what provides, an honest question, no matter where it's coming from, provides an impetus for truth to flow in a particular way. And I think Goswami Maharaj was very interesting when he said, stop reading from your notebook. Because then the person has to express themselves. And then you can interact with that. You can't interact with dogma that somebody's just reciting. And so when there's an honest question, then there's an exchange. And sometimes, as Rai was saying earlier, we can be utilized to say something that's helpful to that person. I think about Guru Maharaj when he was starting he was sent to Madras to preach.
Oh, yeah.
And it's the famous story.
It's so good, though.
But he goes to the minister of the government of Madras and he's saying, please give a donation. This is, to establish the temple of Mahaprabhu in Madras. And he said, I will never give you one paisa as long as there's a person here that is hungry. I will never give you one paisa. And so that's some opposition. And then Guru Maharaj immediately, from memory, quoted the verse of Srimad Bhagavatam that says, when I was an elephant, I ate a jungle, and I'm still hungry. And when I was a pig, I ate a hill of stool, and I'm still hungry. You're not going to cure your hunger by filling your belly again and again. What are you actually hungry for? And so, an honest oppositional question, and like we do have some people that are coming to Salt Lake, like very well-read philosophy student kind of people, but there's an honesty in the question, and then you can interact with that, versus someone coming there to just, just blab a bunch of, like dogmatic statements. I mean, it's not something that you can interact with. But, in Srila Guru Maharaj's Siddhanta, that you would take all of that and say, okay, this is something that is necessary, right? Whatever it is, even that opposition is necessary. And then the question is how do I evolve? Sometimes someone comes and asks you a question. One time somebody in Salt Lake City came, and they were a very developed Mayavadi. And they were asking, saying all these things about the unity of reality, how everything's just one. And most of it I've dealt with, but a few of the things they had said I actually had never heard before. And, Guru Maharaj also says that sometimes when you go out and preach, you're going to be put into circumstances that you just never thought of, right? And someone's going to ask you something or come from a particular angle that you never conceived of. And I know for myself, I was like, wow, you know what? I don't even actually know what Mayavad is. Why do we even call them Mayavadis? What does Vad mean? What does Maya mean? What is this thing? And it was good for me, to go out there and, actually understand, okay, what is this perspective that we call Mayavad? this Advaita philosophy and all these kinds of things. And then, next time, you have some context where you can place the teachings of our teachers and understand that there is a distinction between the approach to reality and ultimately to understand that Brahman has a source and that personality, is the basis of consciousness and these kinds of things. But you wouldn't necessarily go into that unless opposition had come from a particular direction. So it's a catalyst, and it's a, I guess as Guru Maharaj would say, everything is always good. So that's my thoughts on the topic.
Yeah. It's a good subject. Okay.
Sorry, Dee, I didn't, everything so far is nectar. I just want more nectar.
Oh.
I had a question.
Okay.
I know I'd like everybody to use the microphone.
What, can we give you a microphone?
Repeat it. Repeat the question.
Okay, I'll repeat it.
So, both of you have, and this may just embarrass you, but both of you have this incredible sense of clarity, right? That's one thing that strikes me when you hear both of you speak is this clarity that you have, which I don't see, even among other Vaishnavas, not so much. How do you cultivate that clarity? Is that something that when I just try to talk to my kids, I get all confused about it, let alone speaking in public, Have you always had this clarity? Is it just something you were born with, or has it been cultivated through your sadhana?
Okay, so the question is, how it seems that you both display a lot of clarity, and how do you have this clarity? And is it something that you've cultivated through time, or is it something that you feel like you've always had? Is that a good summary? And first, just want to speak to you and just say thank you for saying that. That's very kind. I'll just give it a stab. Clarity is like a kind of jewel-like substance. And I can certainly say I have no ownership over any kind of clarity. But I do feel like we are connected with those who do. Because actually everything feels very oceanic. And I often think of the title that's given to Srila Guru Maharaj, Shastra Nipuna. It's like you have to think that these are such sophisticated cultures, actually. They're giving the titles, we don't really realize, because we'll just say, oh, yes, he was given this name, but we don't really pause so much on, what a sophisticated culture it is to give a name like that, right? Just like the same as, Kaviraj means, the king of poets. Shastra Nipuna is given to this person who understands the deepest import of the scriptures. So this title is a paramount title. It really is. So it's like we can say somehow or other we've come into proximity of someone with clarity. And it's not small, actually. And they're really, what's amazing is when the more and more we're in somehow or other in the aftershocks, we can say of Srila Guru Maharaj's and Srila Gurudev's words, that there is a very cohesive structure that's going on. And so that's also kind of amazing because, sometimes it feels like we're hitting all these different subjects, or we'll hear all these stories and maybe the stories seem like they're almost in opposition to each other, or this thing is that. And you can even see that life is peppered very much by this. So if you read the Mahabharata, throughout the entire scripture, they're saying, what are we supposed to do? Right? So this question is inherently a part of practicing your life where you feel bombarded with different choices and you are desperately praying to the upper world, what am I supposed to do? Right? And we can say that people that are very wonderful and great are able to proceed through uncertainty, through greater and greater levels of uncertainty, their level of navigation. And so this is once we're starting to set this value system in place, right? Because the exact opposite is for the ego, right? So the ego wants certainty and control. Okay, and that's what the mind wants, really. And so once we realize that the mind is sort of like a binary like-dislike machine that is consumed with control and very little with happiness or navigation, it gives us a vocabulary to start understanding and start to gauge things in a different way. And we can say, like, really authentically that Guru Maharaj is like the master of Sambandha Gyan. Right? And Sambandha Gyan means everything has like its hierarchy, so to speak, like slotted. And so then when something comes over our wave of experience, we somehow or other have a way to be able to take that experience and to be able to process that. Right? And so I feel like that is one of the, you know, maybe that's the ultimate thing, right? If someone is able to somehow or other impart something about the nature of reality that's so profound that you'll never change again. And then you don't just say thank you, you try for the rest of your life to kind of reciprocate with that. And so there's a really nice quote. It says, the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. Right? And so then there's like the famous sentence, right, where it's like, you know, all of these different types of practices and all these scriptures, there's 108 different main kind of practices that you should, you know, have in your side. And then it's like, actually there's 54, actually there's like 16, you know, and actually if you whittle them down, there's actually 2 things you're supposed to do. Always remember him and never forget him. Right? And so then you're taking everything through like this kind of lens. Oh, I'm supposed to remember the Lord and never forget him. And then what does that reveal to me? I'm in some type of state of forgetfulness. And now I have a little clarity on my own journey. I'm in a state of forgetfulness. And then there are so many practices too that are relieving this fog of forgetfulness in our life. Right? And so then they're saying, oh, hearing about the lives of the devotees, this is dispelling some of the fog. Oh, being in association with saintly persons, then we can have some fearless consciousness, right? Like Abhaya Charanaravinda, like these kinds of things. And each one of them is making me less forgetful about my situation that I'm in. And of course, then what will that lead to is a greater sense of clarity, right? And then they say first clarity, then motion. Right? So that's why you can see like Gaudiya Vaishnav practitioners, they're so consumed with the goal. Even though we know it's so impossible and despite ourselves. But they're so consumed with speaking about the goal, right? First clarity and then motion. Right? So then they're saying, oh, even on this, you know, particular certain holy days, like we don't speak of these things, but we speak of them so that we know that the highest kind of divinity is possible and that this is the highest kind of divinity. And so, you know, that is such a kind and gracious extension. And there is a clarity to know that I'm actually forgetful. And then it kind of helps inform me on what I need to try and attempt in my own very small way to become more more full of remembrance. You know, and if we can stay every day in a little bit more remembrance than where we were, that's going to transform us. And maybe it's only 0.000001%. But if we even remember very small things, if we remember that we're just passing through, then we can't even treat the people that we're seeing around us in the same way. What to speak of like deeper quality kinds of dedication, right? So such a fog of forgetfulness comes, and by the grace, really the grace. You know, this is like allowing us to kind of get a little idea of what mercy, despite ourselves, completely despite ourselves, some kind of wonderful illuminating light has come, you know, and then we get a chance to kind of throw ourselves. So I don't know if that was helpful, but just some attempts, because clarity is most valuable. Yeah, we want to become clearer and clearer, actually. And I don't know, maybe you have some.
I'll just say something very brief. To answer your question, no. I'm definitely not always had clarity, and you know, there's some, I guess you can say some light, but really by the grace of Guru. I grew up, quote unquote, in Krishna consciousness. But what I took away was very cultural, I could say. certain ways of dressing and being that I became good at, but are not necessarily, without the heart connection, very deep. And when I was in college, I was a philosophy minor. Okay, you want to talk about unclarity, bro? It's like, I've read a lot of thousands of pages of absolute brain-bending destruction. And philosophy is a beautiful word. It's a search for truth, search for reality. What is real? And there's a lot of people who have dedicated a lot of their neurons toward that. And by the grace of Srila Govinda Maharaj, coming out of college, again, coming into the Association of Devotees, my parents were in Chicago, so I kind of grew up in high school, just doing my thing, basically. And that's where clarity comes from. There's an actual system that we're all born into. And there's a necessity that we all have, which is in our heart. In the end, the brain and anything else is not a source of satisfaction. And by the grace of Guru, some touch of that can come. And when you have the primary hierarchy, which is ultimately you're a feeling unit seeking the zenith of feeling, not just feeling, but the zenith of feeling, then there's clarity within, the moments of this thing called life. But then there's still, competing ideas of what is that feeling that you're searching for. And there's a hedonistic, sort of materialistic philosophy that's out there. There's, a union with the oneness of everything, sort of obliteration of an individual identity that is out there, or the obliteration of the soul, period, which is called nirvana. That's out there. Other positions. But I can say that this has been dealt with. These deep philosophical questions of what is the motion of my life have been dealt with in the most compact and essential way by our Guru Varga. Like I can say, having read so much philosophy, that the foreword of Prapanna Jivanamritam is probably the most profound philosophical treatise ever in history. It deals with every other potential way of connecting to truth that's out there, any potential way of finding satisfaction that we're all seeking for. Right? Every one of us feels emptiness and a gap between where we are and something that may not even be clear of where we want to be. And there's that gap that we're always trying to close, and establishing the primacy of Sharanagati as, the path forward in life. And when you have a hierarchy that's very brief and compact, then everything within life can be slotted within that. And it is very clarifying. But that's because great devotees have provided that clarity. Can truly say that. So whatever muddled mess comes out of me, that's from me. And whatever clarity comes out of me, that's from some great gift. Jagurudev.
I think it's a really interesting subject overall. Because our lives seem so muddled with uncertain choices. And I can just say, because you were saying, have you always been this clear? Or do you always feel like you were like that? I would say one very helpful practice in this process is somehow or other feeling that whatever is coming to us, no matter what it is, right? So there's my judgment of the situation, which is either putting it into the good or bad category, because we already talked about how the mind likes to just kind of make it binary. But somehow or other, if it's already happening, like it's coming to you, right? It's not you like kind of offering some seeds out to the universe, but it's coming to you, to first think that there is some purpose in this. Even though I can't see it, my vision is very limited, but I can't see it, but there's purpose in this. Somehow or other, I find that is the very beginning of you start to feel some motion in your life. And all of a sudden, the drama of like, I don't know what to do. And you still might not, or I still don't know what to do, but I'm going, this is purposeful. And then there's not this kind of like strange bifurcated thought of like, this shouldn't be happening. I don't want to make this decision right now. It goes, this is happening and I must walk through this. And I'm begging for the assistance of what do you want me to do in this strange situation? Extremely helpful in my own attempt, because somehow or other, if we're saying this isn't supposed to happen, you're starting to go into like the escape route. And I find honestly like this word Maya is a very interesting word, right? It means like that which is not, that which is measurable, that's which in a small spectrum of possibilities. And really, I think, I'm sure everyone here and beyond has experienced something where they didn't see an obvious solution. And things worked themselves in a very unusual manner. And then Guru Maharaj, he has this quote that I like have it on my wall, and I like to, paint it everywhere. It's just he says, humility means being open to infinite possibility. And it's an amazing quote, right? It's like I am coming up with like the 3 situations that are better and factoring that these ones are going to be more annoying and this one's off the charts bad, right? But humility means being open to infinite possibility. It means like there's many, many things that I haven't even factored yet that I'm not offering myself to. Right? It's not actually being like flexible, so to speak. And we know like yoga means to try and connect with something that's real, not just like physically becoming flexible, but ultimately becoming flexible to divine will. And so there's this idea where we're going in our real lives and there's real conundrums and real problems that are going on. And really, if we talk to anyone, we don't scratch far and we find that they're also in the midst of some kind of, there's an obstacle that's placed. And that obstacle is purposeful. Right? And verily that obstacle is the stepping stone to the next sense of self, right? Because we're hearing like in the fire of sacrifice, who we are now is getting burnt. Some new sense of self is coming. We offer that, the fire of self-sacrifice. Something in us needs to go, right? So we're constantly calculating all the reasons that we're going to be happy. And one of those needs to go. And somehow or other, I find that it's so amazing that I don't actually know what is in my best interest exactly. Very relieving, right? And we get these examples that are just like, they're so beautiful, right? Where Gurudev is, he's hearing a phone call coming in and it's someone who's very disturbed and they're, possibly yelling or something, And Goswami Maharaj was saying to Gurudev, like, do you want me to take this phone call for you? And he goes, no, Krishna wants me to hear that. It's an amazing kind of thing to go, oh, I'm meant to see this. The Lord called me to witness this situation that I never wanted to witness. Right? And now I have to digest that and to proceed forward. And I don't know how to proceed forward. But somehow or other within that dialogue, there's a tremendous amount of motion. Yeah, there's possibility inside of it. Right? Because we don't actually know. There's so many things that we actually can't control in the least. And the more that we realize how small of an amount of control that we have, the more disturbed we're going to get. So then we kind of just default into some kind of willful ignorance because it's all too much, right? And then they're saying like, what are the sadhus doing? They're dancing in the waves, right? Oh, the Lord's putting this in front of me. Okay, Jai. Okay, now here's like this, and then and the offering is even flexible, right? Where it's like, okay, like this. Oh no, not like there's some movement that's going on, and in the process of that movement, think about it. What are they saying? These verses, like your heart's getting, this tar-like substance that's like covering who you are, or like the cutting the knots of like bondage off of you. It's not even who we are, right? And we're so calcified that these tectonic plates need to get disrupted on such a level. Otherwise, like, how can we hear these very, like, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta himself spoke, and he said, karma is prashadam, right? I mean, these are such, like, how can we digest that, and like, prashad, how can we digest that the thing that is coming towards me that looks quite dark is coming to transform me, and the very firmament of reality is affectionate to us. That's what Bhagavad Gita is saying. He's saying, Suhridam Sarvabhutan. It's like he's like your sweetheart, your best friend who's looking out for you. And all we see are enemies and darkness and tragedies and dark valleys. And they're saying all of that karma that's coming to you, just coming to transform you. So we have no idea what the journey has inside of it for us, right? And then the people that are surfing reality are imbibing of an interior substance that is allowing them to navigate anywhere and everywhere, right? Like Bhaktivinoda Thakur's songs, Pashu Paki Hoye Taki Swarge Bani Roye. Whether you want to put me in a bird's body or a beast body, in heaven or in hell, right? These are like these prayers. They're like teaching us even how to pray. We can say that, right? We don't even know how to pray. Like, we're so like, it's just so, even our prayers are like fully filled with our own selfish kind of games going on. It's just like so awful that it's like, oh, and then then we're just like admired in that. And then he's saying, let me love your lotus feet as much as I now love the objects of my senses. And you're saying this type of person is willing to navigate anything with full energy, and they're feeling joy. And that's so, speaking of clarity, it's like those prayers are full of clarity. That songbook has like infinite blessings inside of it. Really, all of these saintly expressions from their heart coming out of their mouth have infinite blessings inside of it. But it's a very helpful practice then. And we don't just want to hear it and then have like a separate part of our life that seems to be compartmentalized, where we're like trying to go to a place to kind of practice to be quote unquote spiritual, which hopefully isn't an external thing, and then go to another place where we're full of disturbance and everything's not going how we planned, right? And so he's saying, I'm willing to go through whatever you want me to go through. And I want to learn how to actually love your lotus feet. I want to learn how to become a lover of reality. Instead of being this kind of strange mosquito on reality, I want to try and like contribute. And I know my contribution is like, like terrifyingly small. But, I hear from the grapevine, so to speak, that you're very merciful. So I'm feeling a little hopeful. Something like that. But that practice, Guru Maharaj even says, if we can learn to see the grace in our situation and try to adjust ourselves to what's occurring, then our service will come to us. Right? And that's actually what we're all desperate for, because service means there's some kind of reciprocal world that we're inside of. Right? And then we're not in the kind of empty place where we don't know what to do, right? There's a little more action going on. So just for whatever that's worth, that gives me a little bit of heart in the dark night to go, okay, there's some purpose in this situation. That's okay. I don't know what that purpose is, but I'm trying to offer it to you, and I don't know what the right situation is, but I trust that it is going to be revealed, and the next chapter is going to have its own kind of profound purpose inside of it, and to try and kind of offer myself to it. And I can say, just for my own like very small experience, that there's a lot of energy in that, and there's a lot of motion inside of that, and you will also feel a lot of affection for people inside of that, which is also like relieving. Sometimes, because we can feel such a wonderful amount of disturbance from sometimes even the people that we are most affectionate towards. And so that can be also like very purposeful, right? And so then you go, oh, okay. And then, right, then we're willing, then we can continue. And that's the main sort of thing, because we don't know what's inside of the next chapter. So I know that was kind of a long-winded answer, but hopefully somewhat helpful.
I want to share because I want to share this what Gurudeva said because it helps me so much. That he said, how can we deal with not getting anxiety and panic? And then Gurudeva said that first say to yourself, whatever comes, good or bad, I'm going to accept it. Secondly, you make yourself neutral. Third, you act on it. And that is the formula. So I've been going through so much too, and I'm trying to remember. And I go, okay, Gurudev, okay. And then I start saying, all right, Gurudev, I offer everything at your lotus feet. Everything. I just transfer to your lotus feet. Because, as you are saying, there is no other way. So that formula really has been helping me. You know? How to deal with anxiety and panic.
Jai.
Right. Thank you so much. Jai Gurudev. Thank you.
Jai. Yeah. It's true because, I mean, really, if we're kind of going to just kind of scratch on the world of anxiety, there's all the things that we don't want to happen that might happen, and all the things that are happening that we don't want to happen, and all the things that we do want to happen that might not happen. And now we can be disturbed all the time. Yeah. And it's like from the second that we open our eyes and remember that we're in a body, the mind immediately on autopilot is going to start hitting all of those things. So it's a serious situation, actually. And so you can see, like, it's not just like a negligible kind of little bit of knowledge that might just kind of assist you with a little thing. It's actually like the actual like balm that can wash over your soul, you know. Yeah, you're not actually the controller of everything, and this is the best news ever. Like, it's like this relief. Yeah. And it's even just the practice of remembering that, or it's like I'm in relation to something larger. Maybe it doesn't even have to be more complicated. Maybe it's like, okay, I offer it to Gurudev. I'm in relation to something larger. I'm not the center, so I am the object of the center. And I can just say for myself, it's the difference of night and day. Because all of our plans, you know, they're made from a small space, so they can't be that clever or great. So. Okay. Oh, good.
I'll just turn up the mic here. At the risk of embarrassing you again, it never feels like you guys are phoning it in, right? It doesn't feel like, I've heard a number of classes that you guys are doing, but you know, I've heard some classes where, you know, it's like, all right, I'm scheduled to give a class, I'm gonna, you know, and how do you keep it fresh? That's the question. Is how do you keep it fresh? I mean, even remembering Gurudev when he would speak, I mean, there were certain topics that he would touch upon frequently, and I interpreted that to be like these are important topics that that bear emphasizing, right? But then, of course, sometimes, you know, just when you think you've heard everything he had to say, something amazing and revelatory would come, right? So yeah, how do you keep? I mean, and just personally, I have this fear of repeating myself. Like, I don't want to tell somebody a story that I've already told them before, you know. And I know they're, you know, I'm like, wait, did I already tell this person? And then they're just kind of humoring me by, you know, smiling along with it. So, I mean, you know, you know, the repetition. We like eating our favorite foods. I mean, there's nothing wrong with repetition, but I just have this. I want to keep it fresh, right? You know, so how do you maintain that enthusiasm, and how do you keep it fresh?
I'll just try and say something briefly. And
You are the one of the enthusiasts.
You know, what keeps it fresh is there's not one of us that is not going through life. And life for each of us is a new set of challenges and experiences every day. And to process that, not in this, you know, the gift of our Guru Varga is that your life is your spiritual life. There's not this artificial bifurcation of, okay, I'm at the temple now, I'm going to do my spiritual life for a couple hours, and now I'm going to go back to, you know, my real life for the next 7 days or whatever. Like, that is a kind of like a hell. And by the grace of Srila Rupa Goswami and Mahaprabhu, and ultimately our Guru Varga, Srila Guru Maharaj, Srila Gurudev, Srila Prabhupada, there's not this like artificial separation between your life and your spiritual life. In fact, the challenges of your life can only be dealt with spiritually. And that's fresh for everybody. There's nothing dead about this. The whole point is that everything is living. There is a live streaming reality. And we are a part of it. And the only reason why we're breathing right now is because we have some service to do. We exist only for the service of the Lord. And so does everything else, and so does everyone else. So there's a live thing that we're a part of. And to come closer and closer into connection with that is to come closer and closer to reality and the freshness of existence. You know, there's an amazing verse, which is the first verse of Shikshamritam, which is the 8 verses, Shikshastakam, excuse me, the 8 verses that Mahaprabhu gave. And there's one part where Srila Sridhar Maharaj talks about what is the meaning of this. It says, Anandam buddhivardhanam pratipadam purnamrita svadanam. And Guru Maharaj says, the nature of reality is this, pratipada purna amrita svadanam. Pratipada, Guru Maharaj says, at every tiniest millisecond. Purna means infinity. Amrita, nectar. Svadanam is coming into existence. Guru Maharaj says the nature of reality is that at every tiniest millisecond, there is a fresh, never before tasted infinity of joy being created by reality. Okay? And that is what the holy name is delivering. Connection to the Lord. That is the nature of the Lord, and that is the nature of the play of the Lord. So this thing that we're trying to move into service, you know, like a relationship of love with, which means I give fully of whatever I am right now and forever. And that's alive. It's never ever dead. It's never ever rote. It's never ever some type of like, you know, just repetitive show that we're putting on. It can never be like that. So, to whatever extent that we can come into connection with the true reality, which is that we are existing right now by a higher grace that says you have some service to do, then there's nothing dead about that. It's only alive. Joy.
Yeah, and Srila Guru Maharaj often uses the term organic whole. And I've always found it's like a very interesting way to refer to reality, right? And the whole idea of the using this word organic whole is it's alive. And then he'll add on top of that, the organic whole is dynamic. So it's like we're so consumed in like such a small world that we're like with a very small spectrum of like possibility, kind of living in this little tunnel. But reality's alive, right? It's alive and it's in motion. And then, of course, if reality is alive and it's in motion, and I am also something that's not static, right? Like I always like that quote quite a bit. It says, "The graveyards must be full of all the people I used to be." Right? So, like, we're hoping our best case scenario is that we're not attracted maybe even to the same thing in a couple years that initially was like the thing, right? We should feel a refinement in a refinement in our questions, a refinement in our ideal, a refinement in what is even like beautiful, right? And then they're saying, and reality's moving. So you're something in motion and reality's in motion. Right? And those two things are occurring at the same time. And then, of course, there's like, that amazing name for the Lord, Navayovana, right? Which means like ever fresh, right? And then, like, how can we even say, like, we're hearing in the scriptures these stories, oh, they're singing the glories of the Lord with unlimited capacity compared to us. And they're falling short. And it's not exaggeration, right? So, what are they coming into contact with? That they're falling short with thousands of tongues and heads. There's something so wondrous at the very basis of what's going on. And the only reason that I don't find anything quite wondrous is because I'm living in this very small, myopic, calcified version of what's supposed to happen. Right? And so we can even say sometimes when these karmic circumstances are happening, they're like disrupting these like tectonic plates of selfishness that we've been developing for multiple lifetimes. And they get you right. And like, one thing I always love, Abhinava loves that sentence, make space for grace, right? It's like, we're not making any space. Karma's coming towards us and disrupting us. And what is it causing us to do? Question what's going on. And then we start to go, oh, wait, what am I doing here? What's going on? And why is this occurring right now? And for those who actually, you could call it like the purveyors of reality, they're saying it's immensely exciting. And it's so exciting that absolutely nothing of the external energy will satisfy me in any way. And all I'm going to do is go over the world and share this good news with everyone. Right. And it's not just like to one person this happened to, but like through time and space, these types of divine people have come into touch with reality. And just to kind of like take it to like a very modern note, I almost wonder sometimes whether it's actually our duty to like, it's like, I really like that word revivify, right? So what is true is always true, but then it's our duty to communicate it in the time that we're in. And that's also something kind of dynamic and exciting. We're not changing the message necessarily, but maybe like the culture kind of changes a little bit and people, change in this way and that way. But the deepest truth is still the same, but it's our job, so to speak, to actually practice that and express that in an authentic way in our life. And then that also takes away from like a cookie cutter world. Right? Because everyone's living a very different life from each other. So what that looks like as an expression, even though it's that same well of deep truth, will be very different. And then that's another way that it's also very fresh. And then that's also what's exciting, right? I mean, these studies, they're just, simple studies, but humans are absolutely addicted to novelty, right? In fact, we'll even do very damaging things to ourselves for just a sense of novelty. Right? So we love it, but there's nothing more novel than the infinite source of reality, right? It's not going to be like a less interesting relationship if we can be consumed with any kind of relationship with a person in the external plane, then the relationship with the supreme source of every type of expression of feeling will be infinitely more wondrous. right? And so then, of course, that also that kind of goes into that world of fresh, right? Because novel and fresh are kind of interchangeable. And we should, in fact, feel that there's something fresh. And in fact, sometimes when we're not feeling something fresh, that like quote unquote feeling of going down, where it's like, oh, there's nothing fresh, that feeling becomes the fuel for the quest, because otherwise we don't get moved to do anything. We're just kind of too comfy. So wherever we kind of like get to, we'll start to kind of like settle into that. Then there's like, again, some burning inside of us. This is not what it's all about. There's some quests. And then that feeling of like settling and boringness or whatever it is of it's not enough, it's allowing us to know I need to go through some transformation, right? And then like that's where Guru Maharaj's famous advice, where he said, when everything is not enough to satisfy you, then again you will dive deep into reality, right? Dive deeper. So when we're feeling stagnant or not fresh, which we all have to experience, that will become the impetus for the next move. Where whatever satisfied us, maybe it was a more superficial conception, and then we realize that it's actually not nourishing on the deepest level. And so it's really amazing to think actually that fuel is also part, that emptiness, that non-fresh feeling that we're having. Otherwise, we wouldn't be motivated to actually go through transformation. And then also it allows, right, like make space for grace. It allows the situation to unfold. So, yeah. Thank you for allowing us to speak and for your questions. Well, didn't we run way over? I thought we went into Sudarshan's time. Oh, do you want to ask Sudarshan one last question?
No. I'm just saying, I don't know if you just want to keep going.
Yeah, it's just.
If we stop.
No, we can keep going.
We can get you a microphone so you have to hold that microphone.
Oh, no, that's fine. That's fine.
So, I mean, you know what was on the schedule.
I have no idea, actually.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
Perfect disciple, perfect guru.
Oh, goodness.
Was the name of your...
I don't know. Maybe we can just kind of continue the conversation just organically, instead of like having a break in it. Yeah, I was just thinking about this idea of progression is so. It's very cool what you said. This idea of freshness and kind of progressive Krishna consciousness, because ultimately it is the nature of reality. You know, Guru Maharaj always uses the term organic whole, as Rai said, and dynamic organic whole. The nature of reality is dynamic. So, you know, one of the bases, the sort of like foundational worldview of Vaishnavism is that I exist to serve the Lord. And in a deeper sense, you know, this Bhagavatam shloka says, Savai pungsang paro dharmo yato bhakti adhoksajay. I'm pointing to Bhimo. I want to hear the beautiful voice sing. Ahaituki aprati hataya yatma suprasiditi. Like there's a flow of reality. It's in motion. And that flow is ahoituki and apratihata, means it's unstoppable. It is what's happening. And it's ahoituki. You can't trace the cause of it. And what's our relationship with that? Jato bhakti radhoksajay. We are to give whatever it is that we are to that inconceivable thing. We can't conceive it. It's not going to fit in our brain. Yet we're to give everything of what we are to that. So you could sum that up and say, What is that? That's the paradharma, you know. Savai Pungsang, Paro Dharmo. It's a really important question. What's the supreme occupation? What's the supreme dharma? What is the real way of envisioning our purpose? In other words, cool shloka, good answer. Just one second, just to finish that point. We have to conceive that we are for Krishna and that everything is for Krishna. That's a foundational point of Vaishnavism. It's all good, bro. It's all good.
My question is,
Well,
let's give Prabhu other microphones. My question, I mean, is that on?
Yeah, I got it now. Thank you. We were speaking earlier, so
Yeah.
we're kind of ahead in this conversation, sort of. But my question is, it can all seem sort of abstract and like reality, and you know everything is happening, and there's a purpose and things. But at what point does that personal connection come? I mean, it comes through Gurudev, essentially, but you know, on a level like Gurudev. He can still come and inspire us, but like at what point? I don't even know my question, I guess, but does it make any sense? Because we can
think
sit
so,
and talk
yes.
about like reality. It's pushing us in so many different ways, and
Yeah.
you know we have to just surrender to it and everything else. But like that sweetness has to come at some point, or otherwise it just feels like suffering, like everything else.
Hare Krishna.
So maybe
Very-
my question is like when, at what point, or
Yeah, man.
or
Listen.
maybe never at all. I don't know, but
No, this is a profound question. It's a profound question. I mean, you know, and this is a question that I think is dealt most beautifully by, you know, the line of Mahaprabhu, but it's a question that is within every scripture. You know, what happens when Moses leads the Israelites out of slavery? Where do they end up? In the desert. Okay? And it's not cool. And not only are they in the desert, they get, you know, attacked by snakes, right? So it's not like you just are like, yay, I'm out of slavery. Or, you know, you could say it's like, you know, it's like the bondage of the material world. You might think of it like that, right? But then you're sort of leaving behind this particular plane of experience, which is like sense gratification, which is basically like our only way of feeling like a breakup of the numbness, right? It's like, yum. No, it went away. You know, right? Like, you're searching for taste. You're getting your taste. You're conditioned to get your taste from certain type of sensory inputs. Now you're saying, hey, cut those sensory inputs off. And they're like, but I like tasting things. It's a really hard thing. And so, you know, the metaphor of the desert is that. It's like you left your bondage, but now where are you? You're nowhere. Right? And that's why Guru Maharaj talks about this progression of like, you know, when you first conceive of spiritual life, it looks like all risk, but all gain. It's like you're risking your whole existence, but at the same time you understand it's like, wow, you know, there's this amazing thing, right? But then there's this feeling of all risk, no gain. Now I threw everything away. That was like my whole egotistic identity. And now I'm like nowhere, right? And that's the desert. You know, that's the feeling of parchedness. Neither of two worlds, right? And what does Rupa Goswami say about that? He says, you have to be like the Chataka bird. And the Chataka bird is this, you know, some say it's a mythical bird in Vedic culture, but it's a bird that subsists only on rainwater. And if you give it water from any other source, it won't take it. It will only drink from the sky. And in our sense, Rupa Goswami is, you have to be like that. You wait for that drop from the top, and you don't take your sustenance from somewhere else. Very intense thing. But if you get one drop of that nectarine substance, then Guru Maharaj says it feels like no risk, all gain. Actually, what I risked was nothing. It was all crap, trash, and I gained everything. Right? So, we have to conceive of this progression that's within us, but we're not interacting with a dead substance. So this thing isn't without its relationship and dynamic, reply, I guess you could say. There's a Mahaprabhu said achintya bheda bheda tattva is Mahaprabhu's Siddhanta, and sort of a philosophical conclusion leading to that is from Sri Ramanuja, who had the Shuddha-dvaita philosophy, right? And the Shuddha-dvaita means there's I don't want to get too technical here, but there's a philosophy in Ramanuja's, creation of Shuddha-dvaita, which is called apritak bhava, which means there is nothing that is not in relationship to Hari, whether it's chit, which means conscious substance, or achit, which means what we call matter. Everything is actually coming from Hari. This is the proper understanding. So when Guru Maharaj is talking about Sharanagati, he's saying you have to first conceive truly that I am meant for the Lord and everything is meant for the Lord. And then the second thing that is emphasized are the 6 limbs of Sharanagati, which are Doinya, Atmanivedana, Goptrit Varana, Avashorakibe Krishna, Vishashapalana, and then take what is helpful to devotion, Bhakti Anukula, and reject what is unhelpful, Bhakti Pratikul. And again, even those things can seem sort of vague, right? When it's just like, okay, well, be humble. How do I do that? It's just like, am I doing it? Right? It's hard. And then, Atmanivedana, give yourself. Right? There's a translation of these conceptions into your life that has to occur. Goptritve Varana means embrace his guardianship. Right? They're still pointing to something, which we have to learn how to make real within our life and practice. I'm confident in the Lord's protection. Right? And if you look at the songs that Bhaktivinoda Thakur wrote under that heading, it's like the cowboys jumped in the Jamuna. He was poisoned. Right? Means there are situations in his life where it's like, oh no, I can't. It's impossible. Go forward, maybe. Right? Are you confident fully? So, we are to learn how to make these things real in our life. And our sadhana that we're doing naturally because Gurudev gave us the sadhana, take the name, practice these rules where we're controlling our senses in a certain way and, kind of move forward in that type of, basics like sadhanas. Those are moving into a sadhana of the practice of your life. And, Sanatana Goswami, Jiva Goswami, Rupa Goswami, and Guru Maharaj, also Saraswati Thakur, all emphasized that the most important component of the 6 limbs of surrender is Goptritve Varanam. So that's embracing the Lord's guardianship. That's very still okay, how do I apply that? This is the most important thing in the path of Sharanagati. How do I apply that? What does that mean? There's a amazing chapter in Sermons 1 that's called The Guardian Ruled Family, where Guru Maharaj is only talking about how to apply Goptritve Varnam in your life. You have to really understand, not only are you meant for Krishna, and everything's meant for Krishna, but Krishna is Suhridam Sarvabhutanam. He's your friend. And you have to start to perceive the guardian behind the moments in your life. So that if something is occurring in your life, even to the point of something what you might call trivial and mundane, oh, I just heard something. You have to think, oh, my guardian wanted me to hear this. Because he did. And if there's some situation in your life, you have to see the smiling hand of your guardian behind that. Right? And you will realize that you are actually loved more than you can even know what that word means. The Lord is interacting with you very carefully and attentively every day. And to practice remembering that and to ask the service energy, Sri Radha, Guru, how can I be utilized in this circumstance? How can I give back? This is like super real in your life. And to do that and understand that these moments are coming, not randomly, not out of a sense of a spite toward you or punishment toward you, but out from a well of love and attentive affection that you cannot even conceive of. Then you can drop the suspicion and the resistance and turn toward some of these things that we don't want to turn toward and embrace them. And that's embracing his guardianship. You know, it's like you can almost think of a psychic posture toward the waves of experience that are flowing over you, where it's like, you know, we get a particular set of circumstance, and what do we want to do psychically? You know, it's like, I'm turning away. I'm like turning away from that, right? I don't want to experience this. And I will physically move my body to another location, or I will like ingest some kind of substance, or I will do something so that I don't have to experience this. And to stop that relationship and to turn toward it and bow and embrace, that's a deeper degree of faith and a deeper willingness to move within reality. And these are, again, they might sound, again, still a little bit like, okay, what do I do? You know, but it's actually super practical. And it's very unique to each person because each of us has a way that the Lord's interacting with us, and each of us has components of our ego that need to get dropped, right? And we're not going to feel like a loser when those are dropped. We're going to feel like we dropped a bag of rocks that we were carrying around for no reason. And that's mercy. That's progression. And that's ultimately forward motion, right? And you're going to feel a you that existed before willingly into a fire where a new you comes out. And that's Atma Nivedana. It's like, oh, give yourself. So what does that mean? Like, give the whole idea of who you think you are right now. That whole egotistic infrastructure. You ready to jump into the fire with that? Oh, well, it's hard. It's for sure, right? And that's the thing we're practicing. And maybe sometimes we'll turn away and go, oh, I know I just turned away. Dang it. You know? But then we're practicing. Then there's motion. Otherwise, we're just the same stunted self, but we're doing all this like spiritual stuff. But when it actually comes down to the moment of the ego going into the fire, then it's like, well, this is Maya, man. You know? It's not. And Guru Maharaj said that you will get a sense of what is called vilas. You know, if you read the foreword to Prapanna Jivanamrita, it's like a very amazing thing. Saying the nature of reality is vilas. Vilas means forward motion. And you're a part of that. There's motion for you. Guru Maharaj says you have to know without a shadow of doubt that your highest prospect is contained within his will. Otherwise, you will never surrender. If you don't really believe that your highest prospect is contained within his will, the will of the motion of reality, then why would you surrender? It is contained within that. What is so good for you is contained in part of that forward motion of reality. And the situations, the circumstances that you find yourself in life are spiritual, and they're practical to practice, really. And it doesn't matter how trivial or mundane they might seem. You might say like, wow, my kid is really annoying the hell out of me right now. Or whatever it is, where you're like, well, that can't be the spiritual life. There's no way. Well, it's like it is. And even harder things, they're all that motion that we seek. But it's not going to be the motion that we conceived and came up with, because that's going to be tinged with our egotistic disease, right? The motion that that we're going to come up with is just like, well, and I wish this person would change, and that person would change, and this thing outside of me would change. Everything else has to change except for me. But actually what needs to happen is everything's fine and I need to change. And that's what's coming to you. So these things are like super real and practical, but very unique to each person. And it's our own honest, authentic practice of Sharanagati that is actually to follow Rupanuga Dharma, to follow Guru Maharaj and Gurudev. There's a reason why Guru Maharaj composed Prapanna Jivanamritam, because it is the highest thing. Sharanagati is the highest expression of the free will of the soul. It is freedom in itself. Everything else is some type of horrific bondage. But Guru Maharaj says the Sharanagatas, they participate in Vilas. Vilas is often translated, if you read it in the Bhagavatam, it's translated as pastimes. But Guru Maharaj gives the definition. Vilas means the forward motion of reality to a point. And that means that there's a play happening. And one of the advices of Guru Maharaj is to take everything in the mood of a player. Right? We have to actually see that there is a unity in reality. Bheda Bheda Tattva. We are inextricably linked with the Lord. Really, like for real. And we are honestly creating these horrific barriers inside of ourselves of separation. And the gift of Guru is that you can perceive this in a different way. That such sweetness is coming to pull you home. There's the search for Sri Krishna, which means we have some consciousness. Now we're searching for the Lord. We're searching for reality. But then, a couple books later, what comes? Loving Search for the Lost Servant. It's not just you searching for him. He's searching for you. And when you can understand that properly, you will see the environment properly. He's pulling you in like such a gentle and sweet way. So this is like a great thesis of our line. And we have to start to perceive and conceive and meditate and ponder these things in our real life, like now. Prabhu.
So, thank you. This is probably a stupid question, but like Guru Maharaj says, like, don't think that you're dealing with Krishna or that Krishna's dealing with you. He's playing with your guru.
Yes.
And just also that like we should not approach Krishna directly. We'll get burned. All these things.
Yes.
So it's obviously a very finer point, but on how while you're speaking of all these things, it's like we don't have a choice. He's already dealing with us in every way. So how to
yeah. So that's a great question, Jagrudev. In the ultimate sense, Guru Maharaj is saying you have to make a choice in sort of where you want your soul to live, because you still have free will. Otherwise, there is no love, right? So you can choose to get obliterated within, like the sort of oneness, the Brahman conception, right? You can choose to continue to stay here in this plane of exploitation and try to organize the world so that it gives you security and sense gratification. You can choose to do that, forever, or you can choose to enter the plane of loving service. And choosing to enter the plane of loving service ultimately means Radha Dasyam. There's one queen of reality. And that means, Radha Dasyam means guru. So when you enter into the plane of service, it means that you must enter into relationship with guru. And in the deeper sense, if you see Saraswati Thakur and others, talking about this relationship with their reality, Guru Maharaj in some way speaks with it very high level and says Krishna is acting in this way, in this way, in this way. But when he's speaking in more refined a level, he's saying you will see that Guru is coming, and Guru is coming, and Guru is coming. And that means the service potency. Because ultimately, what are we being utilized by? We don't know how to please Krishna. She knows how to please Krishna. So, in the really deeper sense, we are moving to be utilized by Guru. So when Guru Maharaj is saying, your reaction to each circumstance that you face should be asking a question, how may I be utilized? Right? And that utilization is coming from Guru. It means, all of reality, we understand, is actually being created to serve the Lord. Right? That means reality is being created by the service energy. And service energy means Guru. So, in the ultimate sense of your fundamental Swarupa identity is in a camp of servitors under a leader, right? Under Sri Radha. And that's why our line is ultimately all Radha Dasyam. Everything is Radha Dasyam.
So Krishna's coming to push us in that direction. All these things he's dealing with us in all these ways, all these things you're talking about.
Yeah.
It's to help us to push us in that direction.
Well, and in the deepest sense, Guru Maharaj would say that actually the service energy is coming to push you in a certain direction. Radha Krishna, the deeper reality, Mahaprabhu. Guru Rupa Haringauram Radha Ruchi Ruchavritam is the third verse in the introductory chapter of Prapanna Jivanamritam. When the Lord takes the form of Guru, then that is in the line of that is Mahaprabhu. That's Gora, and that is the energy of seva, the energy of service of Sri Radha Ruchi Ruchavritam. I mean, this is a mystery. So when you if you have to read Golden Volcano, you have to understand what is Mahaprabhu Leela, because, in the deeper sense, if you read Prema Dhamma Stotram, if you read all these things, and I don't know how familiar you are with all of that, but ultimately it's to understand that Mahaprabhu is the source of all avatars. Actually, Mahaprabhu is avatari. The dancing play of Radha and Krishna in one. And that's really ultimately reality. Look, we're in a line that is extremely mysterious, and sometimes things are presented in sort of a bigger over picture way, and then you have to go deeper and deeper and deeper in the plane of consciousness. But we're saying all these things, Jaya Gauda Hari, Jaya Gauda Hari, and we're kind of like, Mahaprabhu's great, he came and gave us the holy name. You know what I mean? But you have to go deeper, deeper, deeper. And there's a reason why Guru Maharaj Saraswati Thakur was saying Chaitanya Charitamrita is the greatest scripture that has ever appeared in any plane, in any universe, ever at all times. Right? You're going into a very high thing, which is Mahaprabhu and his Leela. And when Mahaprabhu comes to this plane, it's said that the highest thing is being given to the lowest. So we're the lowest. And somehow we come into connection with this highest thing. But it is, always going to be, always we should consider ourselves a student, that is trying to serve something great and mysterious, but we will always be in the position of the student, never in the position of like the overseer. But you know, Prema Dhamma Stotram is an amazing thing, and you know the mystery of the dynamo that is Mahaprabhu is worshipped in that stotram. So, yeah.
I just had a thought.
Take it upon, just one quick, take it upon your head in like a very, you know, worshipful way, because these are the mysteries, you know. In the end of Guru Maharaj's Gaur Purnima song, he says about Mahaprabhu, Channai Avatar, Channai Avatar Lukana Kahar, Radha Ruchi Rupa Chande, right? And this is a very hidden thing, not known in not just this plane, but very rarely in any yuga, in any plane, are these things shown, what Mahaprabhu showed. What is the divine form of Mahaprabhu, and tasting the seva of Sri Radha, the Lord and Radha in one.
Well, now I can't speak after that.
Anyways, what I can say is when we're talking about Sharanagati, these types of things, this is what Guru Maharaj is saying is you have to conceive this in the beginning of your spiritual life. Your spiritual life is a sort of a almost like an act until there's some honest contemplation and attempt toward Sharanagati. And Sharanagati is the beginning of your spiritual life, right? And in the highest plane, you know, when we talk about, you know, Sanatana Goswami proposed Brihad Bhagavatamritam, you know, when you enter Vaikuntha, Rai was talking about, you know, we're in this calcified world of limited expectations and limited possibilities, and, you know, a situation occurs and we think, you know, maybe we think of 3 or 4 things that can happen, and one of them's good and 3 of them are bad. But it's like all of that is just junk, right? You're living in this world of your own limitations. Vaikuntha means what? Limit. Vaikuntha means no limits. Okay? So like you enter Vaikuntha, you have this world of Sharanagati where all these calculations of limits are junk. And then you enter Brihad Bhagavatamritam and Sanatana Goswami. From Brihad Bhagavatamritam, then passing through all the planes of relationship with the Lord. Right, there's so many differences. And then we might talk about Mahaprabhu. Like this is like, you know, we're babies and we're conceiving the idea that God is good and we're doing Goptritra Varnam, right? But that's moving us to where we can conceive and maybe even participate in a plane of life that is actual reality, that's huge, and infinite progression of that, you know, tasting substance of the soul. So, what am I? I'm like a little kid, but I'm just trying to like set the context for these types of things. Hare
It's
Krishna.
a nice meditation also in Sri Guru and His Grace when it's talking about the world of Guru. It's the culmination of so much Sukriti that is kind of allowing us to come in the physical presence of the divine guide. But also, as we're going on, Guru Maharaj is starting to talk about we're entering the land of gurus, right? So then he's saying also that Krishna himself is utilizing that person to give you a message. And they're also playing a role in their own dynamic motion of being the teacher to you, right? So there's all different kinds of illuminations to Guru that are very, very broad, right? Because we don't want to like feel like there's a separation, like, oh, the environment is coming to me. Why would I even need a spiritual? It's like, no, this is like the great culmination of so many glorious circumstances for your own betterment that you find yourself with your hands open to receive some type of. They say that when actually initiation is like the reciprocation of the upper world with us, right? That's like some indication. But there's so many levels of indication. Otherwise, we don't want to just separate it and become like kind of dogmatic. Guru Maharaj is very liberal minded. Otherwise, why is there stories in the Bhagavatam that are very, very unusual? And in many scriptures, actually. But particularly in the Bhagavatam, like there's a story of Pingala, who is a prostitute, right? And she's trying to get work, and she doesn't get work. And all of a sudden, a realization comes into her. And she goes, I'm feeling apathy towards the whole material energy. And she goes, this is so shocking to me that I feel an apathy towards material energy, that this is proving that there's God, right? So these moments, and then of course, like the very famous story, I won't go into the whole details of the story, but the famous prostitute Lakshahira, right? Right, there's like a very beautiful lady, and there was a leper Brahmin, and he kind of saw her and like was interested in her, and his high class wife saw that and started serving this lady, and she said, "Who's cleaning everything? This is like another level of person here." And then she said, "Oh, it's this lady." She said something about her husband. It's like a very kind of unusual story, and she serves them dinner. She makes this like kind of opulent dinner with all different kinds of meat and wine and alcohol and all these things. And then she makes this like very simple kind of prasad that's offered to the Lord. And the Brahmin comes and she goes, "You think you want me? Which prasadam will you want? And he's like, "Oh, the simple prasad." And she goes, "This is actually what you want." And the revelation that comes to him through this what we would consider the very fringes of society is so much so that he says, "Oh, you become my guru, because you're giving me clarity on what's actually important in life," right? So this principle of guru is very broad, but it's our greatest fortune if it culminates in a person that we can offer obeisances to. This is, in all of our little wanderings, Brahmanda, Brahmite, Kona Bhagavati, right? We're going through all these places, just kind of like, a little mosquito on the universe, desperately trying to search for selfishness. And as we're on this, we kind of interact with something that's a little bit of another substance, and it changes the trajectory of where we're going a little bit. And then we say that's causeless mercy, and it starts a spiral of Sukriti. But who that messenger is, ultimately, it's not the prostitute that's getting that, right? It's the Lord is utilizing that person, and anyone can be the cause, right? We're just surfing through eternity until we get some kind of interaction that's going to stop that trajectory. It's just this karmic rebound game that we're playing. It's just like throwing energy out, and it's already at the moment that we throw even speech out of our mouth, the rebound is coming towards us. That's what karma means, right? And it's only separated by what? Time. That's why we're so ignorant of what comes back towards us, because we're all playing this little Mayak game of like, I'm going to get a little less back than I put out, right? Or I'll get a little more back than what I put in. I'll put the least investment for the most profit, and that's what success means. That's the game of the calculating mind with Maya. But in any of these, because reality is dynamic, and like the best news of all, right? The supreme source of reality is effective. Guru Maharaj's word, you know how he defines Mahaprabhu? Infinity in distribution. It's like the most amazing way to express some incarnation of the Lord. And he may use any medium, and then we call that medium Guru, right? And it's such an amazing conception, actually. And then in Sri Guru and His Grace, even like Guru Maharaj himself says, sometimes someone's utilized for giving some message to you from an upper world, and then they're not continuously utilized. And that's also like accommodated there, and without disturbance, right? to go that there's a much, much more profound principle that's kind of occurring, that all of these things are coming to you. And then it's your, like, the most fortune that you find yourself with people that want to glorify the Lord and that who want to serve the Lord. And then, right, then who is a sadhu? Like, who is wholesale? They have no return ticket. And actually, as much as we're thinking that we're surrendering to them as if that's something valuable, right? They don't need anything from us. It's only their affection, actually, that's just this totally shocking experience. They don't need anything from us. You know, it's like, actually, even the Supreme Lord, like, if he wasn't the, like, all penultimate connoisseur of love and affection, he does not need us to do a single activity for him, as he is self-satisfied. His own name is self-satisfied, right? Like, he is perfect. But because he's the connoisseur of love, something is so unusually valuable about the nature of love that it even has the ability to pull the attention from the upper worlds. That's the thing that we have that's valuable, right? So it's just something that came, though, is that this idea of guru can be very, very specific, and that's our greatest fortune, and also very broad. And Guru Maharaj is like urging us to proceed into that world of guru.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, let's search for the Sri Guru and His grace. You know, I mean, these are the topics to understand. You know, like, in one sense, Krishna says, Acharya mam vijanayan, I am the Acharya, right? And in a sense, you know, when Guru Maharaj talks about, you know, like, you know, some devotees are coming to him that are senior devotees and saying, like, I'm feeling like I am not qualified. I'm supposed to be a guru, and I'm not qualified, right? And Guru Maharaj says, you have to put yourself forward to be utilized. So in a sense, sometimes Guru is channeling that higher thing. But there's also kind of a hierarchy of gurus that Guru Maharaj is also giving us, and maybe that's a little bit of the topic that we were supposed to talk about. Which is, you know, Guru Maharaj says there's 3 types of gurus. One guru is actually in the material world. That's where their consciousness is. But they have actual honest clarity of where they should seek. They're looking toward the right place. Guru Maharaj says, you can learn from that person. That's a type of guru. And then there's a guru who actually is in the material world and also has some spiritual touch. 1 foot in the material world, 1 foot in the spiritual world. And you can learn from that person. Higher person. And then there's a 3rd type of guru which has both feet in the spiritual world, and yet they are coming into the spiritual world. And that's the highest type of guru. That's Gurudev. That's Guru Srila Govinda Maharaj. We can say that. And that is, you know, I mean, in the case of Srila Govinda Maharaj, you're talking about a Ragamarg Bhakta, like a real member of that higher world of Vrindavan. And so these things are not uniform, right? One type of guru is an actual resident of the land of Seva. And another guru can help us and be utilized and push us in a certain direction. And in the examples that Rai is giving, sometimes in your environment you can see guru is coming. You know, something is coming and pushing you in a particular direction that you didn't think of. And that's, you know, if you're egotistic, you think, dang, I had a great idea. But if you're a little more perceptive, you can think, oh, this occurred and this occurred and this occurred, and it pushed me in this direction, right? And you can see guru there. So, you know, there's this, and then someone came and asked, you know, Guru Maharaj, you know, there's that line in Sri Guru Charana Padma, right? Chakhudano dilo jay, janme janme prabhu se. He's my Lord, birth after birth. And so one devotee interpreted that and said, oh, I mean, does that mean like Prabhupada has to like keep coming back here and like dealing with me, and because it's like birth after birth after birth, you know, until I'm like, finally I'm like rehabilitated. And Guru was saying, no, like, that there's this higher universal guru potency that will always come and help you at the position where you've reached in every lifetime. So that mercy potency of the Lord, that's guru in a deeper sense, right? And then as you enter into the world of Godhead, then it becomes more specific. So Saraswati Thakur actually came up with this term Godhead, because it actually is not. Sometimes we say Krishna, or we say God, or you could say the Lord coming in this form or that form. But for an actual resident of that land, their understanding, no, it's not like that. It's like if someone is looking at the Himalayas and they just see like this sort of silhouette of mountains, and they're like, yep, there's the Himalaya. And then the example is like, okay, that's how it looks and how you might refer to it when you're far away. But when you talk about the spiritual world or the Lord, right, and you come a little closer, then you realize like, oh, wow, there is a lot of foothills, and there's like an almost infinite number of streams and creeks coming out of this mountain, and so much wildlife and all these kinds of, then you realize like that Godhead world is rich and deep. And there's many, many personalities within that. So, this kind of, way of speaking where you say, okay, Krishna is doing this, Krishna is doing that. It's like this reference to Godhead, the supreme personality of Godhead, right? But Godhead means that it's actually very rich within that, with personality. And that, ultimately we're to see, reality in, a deeper way. As we move closer. So, there's always this achintya bheda bheda tattva. And it's very, very deep what Mahaprabhu is saying there. Again, Mahaprabhu gave very few things. And sometimes you can see them and say, oh, that's just so simple. But actually, it's so profound and deep. Achintya bheda bheda tattva means, like, there's this unity between the Lord and the diversity of creation and all of us. But, and I think Nani just listened to this lecture. Oh, maybe give her the mic.
Srila Guru Maharaj was saying, the dividing point, is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
Only the Lord knows. So it's a chintya. It's inconceivable, this oneness and difference, but that it's inconceivable because only the Lord knows that dividing point, where it is the same and where it is different. That differentiating point is only known to Him.
That's right. So, when we approach our spiritual life, we're being called to start to see reality a little bit differently. Like it says in chapter 7 of Bhagavad Gita, everything rests upon me like pearls on a string. Oh, okay. Right? And Krishna's saying, like, my Maya is like insurmountable unless you go to me, because I'm at the basis of all of it. Right? So there's this like calling, you have to go deeper. You have to understand that there's no plane of reality that exists separate from the Lord. There's not some part of reality that's over here where it's like, this is not God part. And then it's like no, it's impossible. There's nothing that's not like that, right? Yet we're not seeing the Lord. Oh, is it a problem with reality or is it a problem with us? Chakshu dano dilo jay. What are they saying? Chakshu, my eyes. They're not seeing properly. Om agyana timirandhasya gyananjana shalakaya chakshurun militam jena. Again and again, this reference is saying, I'm not seeing properly. I have the cataract in my eye. That's the problem. Like, I'm the problem. I'm not seeing reality properly. I'm not interacting with reality properly. So what needs to happen? Anjana needs to go on my eyes. It means ointment. This is actually in Ayurveda the cure for cataract. Anjana. And what is the applicator of the Anjana called? Shalaka. Guru is applying the Anjana to my eye, and now I can see differently. It's the epiphany. Did the world change? I had an epiphany. Did the world change? No, I changed. And now the world's different. So, we have to become devotees. That's actually the problem. The world is not the problem. Nobody else is the problem. It's me. I'm the one who's viewing things from a jaundiced perspective and trying to manipulate and control everything. And I'm willingly embarking with all of my free will upon the journey of becoming a contributor and a devoted servant rather than an exploiter and a whiner.
So you cannot get out of jail until you recognize that you are in jail.
Haribo. Yeah, a jail of my own making. Okay. Jai Shri Gurudev ki jai. Jai Shri Guru Maharaj ki jai. Govinda Mela ki jai. All the great devotees here ki jai. Srila Bhakti Pavan Janana Maharaj ki jai. Go Premanande Haribo.
Jai. Sorry. Thank you, Rai Kishori, Devi. Thank you, Sudarshan Prabhu. Such a beautiful class, such beautiful words. We're really happy to have you here. You're going to have some kirtan? Or I don't know what's going on.
I don't know.
Yeah? Okay.
Prabhu, is that what are we doing?
Sing Hare
Okay, sing Hare Krishna. All right. We will sing. What should we sing? Shri Guru Charles? Gurudev Kripa Bindi. All right. We'll just sing Gurudev Kripa Bindu Diya and or Bhajahure Mano, either one. Well,
Bhajahure mana Shri Nandanandana Abhaya Charanara Vindore
Bhajahure mana Shri Nandanandana
Durlabha manava janama satsange Durlabha manava janama satsange Tara hoye bhava sindore Sitaya tapa bhata varishana Eidina jamini jagire Eidina jamini Vipale sevino kripana durajana Vipale sevino kripana durajana Chapala shukala bala gire Eidana jobana putra parijana Itakiya
Jnana Patra Padma Jala Jivana Talamala O Kamala Tala Jala Jivana Talamala Bajahu Hari Pada Niti Abaya Charana Ravindore Shavana Kirtana Smarana Vandana Pada Shivana Dasyare Pujana Saki Jana Yatmani Vedana Pujana Saki Jana Yatmani Vedana Govinda Dasha Vilashare Abaya Charana Ravindore Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Oh Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Hare Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Oh Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Oh Nitai Gaura Haribo, 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 Gaura Haribo. Oh Nitai Gaura Haribo, 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 Gaura Haribo.
ओम विष्णु पाद शिल भक्ति सुंदर गोविंद गोस्वामी महाराज की जय रूपानुगो गुरु वर्ग की जय नाम संकीर्तन की जय निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे हरि हरि बोल जय गौर
Can I ask a really quick follow-up question? I'm serious.
I know.
So Sudarshan brought us to the point of reality and past our ego and past past all the Neshets and the Maya and the Tings. And the last thing you said, Rai, was talking about how we actually attract the grace of Krishna to the infinite or Guru is through love. Like, how do we cultivate that love once we've been purified and our consciousness has been aligned and everything? We come to zero.
Sounds like Bhakti Yoga.
That's what I thought you were going to say.
Tune in next week.
Sounds like our whole life to go
Heck
on
yeah.
that quest. Sounds like Sharanagati. Sounds like all those things. That's our whole life and the next one. And ad infinitum. Right?
There's a really nice, at the end of that Guardian Ruled Family chapter in Sermons 1, which I highly recommend reading. Really amazing. In fact, the whole book's pretty good. There's a section where Guru Maharaj is saying that if you can actually process the circumstances that you're in properly, sacrifice of your ego, let that be burned, and continually put forth yourself, regardless of whether something is coming to you or not for service, then recognition will come to you. And the next service will come. And to continually sacrifice yourself without regard to your own attainment or gratification. That's love. And any other definition of love is bogus. Kumar says love means sacrifice. So when you start talking about love, sometimes we get like, I love pizza, I love dogs, I love mountains, all that kind of love mixed in. But love means one thing, sacrifice. And so, this willingness to be Bimala is what we got to work on.